Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th discussion of the Optimized 24 AI series, Level Up by Leveraging AI. My name is Chloe Norwood, and I'm the Field Marketing Specialist at Visible Thread. Before we begin, I'd like to note the free content box on your screen. We have included some free assets for you all to check out. There will be a Q&A session towards the end. Feel free to submit any questions throughout the presentation. And now I am happy to introduce our speaker, Uniqueka Walcott, Proposal Manager at AECOM.
Thank you for the introduction. It's been really, really exciting opportunity. Chloe, I'm not seeing my slides. I'm so sorry.
Did you close the widget by chance?
Oh, no.
Do you see an arrow? Sorry, everyone.
Got it. Sorry about that, guys. So today we're going to talk about the opportunity before us that I think has been just a hot topic all year long. We want to talk about leveling up by leveraging AI. I want to make sure everybody's in the right space. So I want to make sure that you understand that this is not a session where I'm going to go, step by step. This is where you're going to use AI as a part of your proposal process. This is really a conversation about getting buy-in with your executive leadership team and some of the things that you need to be prepared for that conversation. And so with that, we'll get into it. Level up by leveraging AI. So a little bit about myself. I'm, wife. I'm the cool aunt. I buy all the good gifts, and I'm the cat mom, in Orlando. I lead enterprise critical pursuits at AECOM. Just for a little bit of context for today's conversation, I really enjoyed sort of the intersection of technology and proposals. It's something that I've been exploring since 2018, looking at, augmented and virtual reality. I've hosted a podcast called Career Conversations where I've talked to people in a wide variety of professions. And I share that because I know that some people are concerned about the future of our profession. We can get more into that in the next session in the Q&A. AEC marketer who's worked at firms that are, 50 people and now 50,000 people. And that informs my perspective about our experience as marketers in this industry. So I want to just talk about the agenda for today. And so I think the biggest picture idea we want to take from this is about how we need to show up. So we need to be curious, we need to be mindful, we need to be prepared, and we need to be powerful. And so being curious is really about making sure that we've got the right foundation of information so that we're prepared to ask thoughtful questions. We don't necessarily need to know every single thing about AI. I think that sometimes is intimidating when we go to our executive leadership team and say, hey, well, let's have this conversation, but you don't have all of the bits and pieces. So we're going to give you some of that information today so that you can be more effectively equipped and based on your organization's needs and your understanding of how your leadership team thinks, you can dive deeper into particular issues that are important to you. Being mindful, this is, a conversation about budget. This is also a conversation about is your organization actually ready to take this task on? I did read somewhere recently that, 70% of digital transformations fail. And so we really want to make sure that this is the right move for your organization, not just something to do to follow the trends and hot topics of the day. The third thing we're going to talk about is being prepared. How do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare your team to navigate this big change that's, happening for a lot of us? And the last piece is about being powerful. I feel like especially, as women, which is the majority of the proposal management profession, a lot of us feel like maybe we don't have a place or a space in this conversation. So I really just want to encourage you to get involved. And so step one, be curious. This is all about knowing enough to be dangerous. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of things that have been really important to me along this journey and getting involved in some of the things that are happening in my career as far as being a part of AI task force and really just, gauging what has happened and shifted over the last 2 years, via my own experimentation. And so I've gotten a chance to sit on quite a few demos for different companies who are, offering things like, proposal, AI tools. And what I have learned is that sometimes they're selling us, some fancy, cool, words that don't have anything to do with the actual technology that they're offering. And so I had to learn is to kind of distinguish automation from artificial intelligence. And so the biggest sort of way I was able to get my mind around this is to understand that automation is literally going to give you what you put in. So if you've got, a library of 100 things and you've tagged it with a few keywords, you're going to get the content associated with that, and it's going to be exactly what you put in. Whereas with artificial intelligence, you'll get what some of us writers might call an elegant variation, or, a connection of 2 or 3 ideas that are now structured into a different format that you never wrote yourself. And that's really kind of the big thing that helped me understand the difference with generative AI and automation when it comes to the proposal tools. The biggest thing you really want to make sure you take home is that both of these require human input. This is not, wave a magic wand and voila, you've got an entire document that's ready to put in front of a client. So here's some of the benefits of adoption that I've, uncovered as a part of the research process. And this is, not specifically proposal explicit, but this is based on a study from several consulting groups who gathered and did research and examined and compared the outputs and efficiency and productivity for their employees who were equipped with AI tools. And so based on this white paper, they discovered that 12.2% more productivity. People were 25% more efficient. I mean, could you imagine what you could do with 25% more efficiency as an organization? And then for, varying levels of skills, some of the people who were, more junior, they had 40% higher quality outputs. And this doesn't exclude people who are more seasoned. Some of their top performers even noticed, single-digit improvements in their quality. So there are some opportunities here with considering adopting AI for your organization. I want to talk a little bit more about also the risk of adoption. Some of these are also covered in the white paper. Others are things that presented themselves to me as I did more research and understanding the process. So burnout. I think that one of the risks is sharing a previous statistic with you all is to go, oh, we can get 25%, more efficiency, 12% more productivity. That means our team can do 20 times more work. And so I want to make sure that we understand that this is not a license for us to, pile the workload high and to continue to stoke the fire that is high turnover and, stress-related illness. I have talked to so many peers over the years who've, said, I know so many people who are long-term in this industry who've, suffered with different illnesses or just have, chronic stress. And so this is, one of those things you still need to be mindful. Even in giving people new tools, that doesn't mean they suddenly have become superhuman versions of themselves. The other thing we want to think about is over-reliance. I don't know if you've ever had an intern and tried to explain to them how to write a resume or a project description, but it's not an easy task, and it's one that is absolutely worth doing. So that's what I want us to understand is that when we have things like over-reliance on tools where we have mastered the prompt engineering part of this and we don't really have to focus so heavily on writing that first draft ourselves, it's really important not to get to a place where we're so reliant, we lose the ability to do those things for ourselves. Biases and inaccuracies are also another factor. I think sometimes we neglect to consider the fact that our tools are often really a mirror and reflection of our own ideas and our own behaviors. And so it's really important for us to step in and to mitigate some of the harm around tools that are not being effectively monitored and trained so that they can tease out some of those concerns that we have around bias. Security is, I think the first question. I was watching a Wells session earlier today, and she talked about, the top 3 questions that a lot of clients in, executives ask when she's sitting in briefings, and they talk about security, as well as how does it impact their brand. And so I feel like these 2 things are married. Security, obviously you don't want to take classified information and dump it into ChatGPT or Gemini. That would cause some serious problems. The other thing is if you were sharing, some of the things that give you a competitive advantage and they're now publicly available, what's to say this information can't now be used against you to reduce your competitive advantage? So you definitely want to make sure that the tools that you use are secured and closed off and not necessarily, creating a free-for-all for yourself or worst case, national security risk. Sustainability is another factor you want to consider with respect to risk for adoption. E-waste, energy consumption, water consumption. One of the things I was really surprised to learn is the concerns being voiced around the facilities and things that are needed to host the servers and things for a lot of our new favorite tools. They consume a lot of water. A lot of water is needed to cool these very heated, facilities. There's, e-waste. The same with, your phone. Eventually the battery dies, or the software is no longer able to update on the current system you've got, then you have to replace those things. As we make advances in AI to do all kinds of incredible things, and so I don't want to say that or give the impression AI is a bad thing. AI can also, on the converse of using a lot of water, be used to identify drought patterns and to help people fight food insecurity. So there's a lot of good things happening. The other thing is really thinking about the shift in regulatory standards and even insufficient standards. And so we've got to really operate from a space of, personal accountability and corporate accountability so that taking the right step to protect all of our best interests. The other thing to think about is just shifting regulations. As regulations catch up with a lot of the things that are happening in our day-to-day lives, we have to be prepared to have the infrastructure in place to make those changes. And some of it may not be as simple as flipping the switch. That's one of the things that I learned during my years in the mortgage industry. They go, oh, we've got a new regulation and we've got 6 months to comply. So that means, software has got to be updated, forms change. There's so many things that could go into the changing. So these are some of the risks you want to consider when you go to an executive leadership team and go, hey, we've got this great opportunity, but also here are the risks we need to consider. Does this align with, our mission, our vision, and our values? That's the conversation you want to have. So be mindful. New tools will not fix culture. In fact, when I was reading about the percentage of failure for digital transformation rollouts, what I learned is that there was 6 risks identified, and one of them was culture. And although they said, hey, don't focus on culture, I think that it's about being mindful. Sometimes we think that we've got a golden ticket as a result of new tech rolling out. And so I want us to kind of focus on this roadmap when we're talking to our leadership team. From start to finish, is now the time? Can we get a clear definition on the opportunity? What problem or challenge are we trying to focus on? And how do we actually think this is going to resolve it? Who needs to be included in the conversation? I think we've all got our short list of the kind of skills and talent that need to be included here. I think it's also important to consider the personality types. Moving along the roadmap, we also want to consider, which options are even worth our entertaining. Do we have a budget? If we're, looking at the Ferrari of options and we've got the toy car budget, this may not be a reasonable and worthwhile conversation. The other thing is, because technology is changing, when do we make decisions on when to roll out or test or pilot these items? Like, that should be a part of your roadmap conversation. If we're going to spend 2 years figuring out, this thing, about 2 years have gone by, 20 things have changed. Is this even the same opportunity that it once looked like? So those are things we're going to explore on this roadmap. So part 1 is now the time. I don't know about you guys, but I have at times been completely overwhelmed with the amount of information in the news surrounding AI, whether it's about, job security or, who's using artificial intelligence. There was a time when I walked into an airport a few years back and it was like, the newsstands were exploding with AI related, news and information. And the sort of general context of it all was, everyone's doing it. Why are you not doing it? You're behind. And then I got to a Pew Research report a few months later, and it was like, okay, only 20% of adults have used this tool. This was maybe 2 years ago. And so as of even April last year, it was 79% of adults have been exposed to generative AI tools, but only about 22% were using it in their day-to-day lives. And so these are the things I want you to think about for your organization. Is now the time? Do you have the budget? Do you have the talent and capacity to lead this from start to finish? Like, that's a genuine conversation that needs to be had. You would do yourself a huge disservice as an organization to make investments in a tool prematurely and end up, in a spot where you don't have the capital to continue doing your basic operations. So is now the time is question number 1. Again, back to that idea of a golden ticket. This is not going to fix every single problem your organization has ever had or immediately save you $1 million. So you really want to understand with your collective group, at the executive level, and even bring in people who are individual contributors and people who are going to be much more acquainted with the business challenges you think you're trying to solve. You may not understand the full picture. And when you've got a fun and, final clear understanding and get consensus, okay, this is what we think the problem is or the challenges are here. Get that in writing and then refer to it daily. And I've realized that daily may not be a real feasible thing for a lot of people, but the idea and emphasis here is that this needs to be sort of a guiding light in a lot of the conversations when things get off track. And so when we talked about, is now the time, who do we include as kind of the other part of the conversation? I think that the obvious answer is yes, we want the CEO in this. Yes, we want the IT director. Yes, we want someone with cybersecurity experience. We need all those talented people in the room to make sure that we're making the right judgment calls. It is also very important that we have people with different sort of personalities and taste and just skills. And so, like, you're looking for the naysayer, the guy that's like, nope, we aren't buying silly tech toys. Let him say it every 15 minutes. It's fine. Ask him why. Why does he feel that way? He will help you understand some of the objections that you may face with other key influencers and decision makers in the organization. And he may actually talk you out of a bad business decision, but that's why you need the naysayer in the room. You want somebody who's a researcher. They're going to keep up with the latest news and make everyone else aware, because there was a time as a member of the task force where I literally was like, I went to bed last night and this has changed again today. I thought I knew what was happening. You need the person who is engaged and able to at least equip the group to ask better questions. The director sort of personality, you're looking for somebody that's going to keep the team focused on how whatever the option is that you're exploring is related to the challenge that you all identified in the previous step. I also think it's important to have the enthusiast in your organization as a part of this conversation. They're going to be the person that's going to come up with creative, case, studies and ideas of how this tool can be used that maybe you didn't consider before, but they're also going to be an important source for keeping the team energized and excited, because sometimes it is not fun. It can be challenging. It can be stressful. I see a question in the comment, do I currently use ChatGPT? I am not able to use that at work, but personally I have used it for a variety of tasks. We've got some other tools and options that are more appropriate, because GPT is open source. So great question though. Thank you, Michelle. The other step in this process, obviously set a budget. I've said this before. If you've got toy car budget, maybe you're not buying the Ferrari of tools. And so that's something to really think about, so that you're not exploring options that do not match the ability to spend. And so resources to consider. I dare not run down a list of things. Obviously, if you're here at this conference, you're aware of Visible Thread. But I would suggest maybe taking a look at, there's an AI for that. Also, proposal industry experts, they've got a software buying guide that really goes over a lot of the things that's focused for proposal industry professionals. Monitor your competitors' approaches and outcomes. Find out what your top competition is doing, and has it worked for them? Does it look interesting or promising? If there are tools that you've already explored yourself and you go, okay, this is good, but it's not quite it, who are their competitors? Explore those tools as well. Another way to kind of really figure out which options to consider is to really take the time to subscribe to industry thought leaders content, whether that's a LinkedIn newsletter or an email list, or just hitting the follow button. I've got quite a few people that I follow on LinkedIn that have been huge assets to help me understand the ever evolving landscape that is considering AI adoption. When do we decide? I think this is just a sort of key point, because I think sometimes we want to run with scissors, and that's what I joke about as people, let's decide this in 25 seconds. Okay, maybe you don't have enough information yet. By the same token, you don't want to spend 3 years making a decision that should have taken 30 days. So get consensus with your team on what's going to be the most effective approach for your organization, for your cash flow, whatever the challenges are that are getting there. But be mindful of the time when you make these decisions. Sitting too long can be detrimental, just as well as moving too quickly. And so you as an individual and as a group can parse that out. The other thing that I want to make sure that we're talking about when we're talking about this roadmap is measuring the return on investment. And so I want people to really, assess, we expect higher win rates, we expect increased bid capacity, and we hope that people are enjoying their work more because they've got a better work-life balance, and so they're retaining the staff. Is that actually true? And so, this is where you take all of that data while you guys are still in some of this deciding phase. There's no harm in tracking your key performance indicators. You should be doing that anyway. And making sure that you've got a solid baseline to compare the before and after again, so that you are making sound judgments about, is this really what we thought it would be? Is this going to be, a cute idea that really didn't deliver? Or are there other ways that you think it benefits the team that are maybe not as tangible but worthwhile? Does it somehow boost morale for people? Like, I think we have to not always be so attached to the bottom line. If it makes people happier at work, is that maybe the benefit and the return? Obviously, that's not strictly a business judgment call or maybe the sole reason to retain or keep something, but those are things you want to think about. And when you take a moment and review, your revenue, this is just kind of a flow chart for image reference. It's not actually a reference to any actual data. You want to review, okay, what results did we expect? How does that align with what actually happened? Where's the break? Don't just look at the data from a pass fail sort of perspective. Look at the data and gain a deeper understanding of parts worked and what didn't work. And so some of that's going to require you to take not just the quantitative approach, but also look at some of the qualitative data. So that's where you might sit down and have interviews and feedback with some of your team leads and some of your individual contributors about their experience, and consider those as a part of the way you measure your ROI and adjust your approach going forward. It doesn't necessarily have to be, okay, this is canceled because it didn't go exactly how we planned. Okay, well, what did we not do effectively that was a part of our plan that was included in the plan? Those are the kinds of things you want to think about. So this is just kind of a rehash of the roadmap. Is now the time? Define the opportunity. Have we really clearly defined these challenges? Is a tool the appropriate solution? Who needs to be in this conversation? Like, that's really critical. I've given you sort of the archetype approach, but obviously you absolutely need the right talent. And so, finding somebody fresh out of college to lead something that is as significant as this initiative may not be the right choice. Should they be included? Absolutely. They might give you some novel ideas that somebody that's been in a particular role or phase of career for 30 years may not consider, because sometimes there's the risk of we've always done it this way. So that's not to say be exclusionary to folks, but like really think carefully about who needs to be included. What options will be considered? You can get pretty clear pretty fast on what you need, what features and benefits. After you go through a few demos, you go, okay, like this feature or benefit is important to me, this one is not. And that'll help you kind of parse through what's available. Again, when do you decide? How do you measure it? Review and begin again. I mean, and so that might not even be this tool, it may be a different type of tool. But that's setting the roadmap. Mindful of the time, we've got about 10 minutes. We've got step 3 is to be prepared. So in being prepared, I want to first talk about preparing yourself. I think that for some of us, we don't recognize some of the hidden stress and the ambiguity in the environment. So have a clear stress management plan, whether that looks like going to the gym a few times a week or having, a buddy in the process just you can kind of debrief and decompress with. Identify skills and other aligned stretch opportunities for yourself. So for me, one of the things that was immediately obvious is that prompt engineering is a skill you need to have. And so for me, that meant, okay, let me find some resources and tools that will teach me that. There are plenty available. The other thing I looked at was other stretch opportunities. I realized that there were speaking opportunities externally, but there were also task force opportunities internally that were really helpful in helping me just understand, like, what are the challenges that my organization is facing? What are they trying to resolve? How can I be a part of that and be a voice in the conversation? I think if you're going to be a leader in this particular space, you have got to make sure that you choose your words thoughtfully. You could say something very passively and calmly, but if you choose the wrong words, people may read into it wrong or have the wrong impression and panic. And you don't want to ever create that for people. And preparing yourself, I think it's also important to be patient and keep practicing new skills. What I learned early on in prompt engineering was that, it's not one size fits all. There's not like an absolute right way to do things. It's more about understanding the structure around it and adapting the way that you approach getting the information that you need via tools like ChatGPT. Preparing yourself may also mean identifying those task force members pretty early on, calling or making the email and finding out if people are actually interested, because it's wonderful to have a plan and then they go, well, look, I'm not available, I'm not interested. The other thing you may consider in addition to task force members are people who are just key influencers in the organization who may not necessarily have capacity or interest in being on the actual task force, but may be willing to share their thoughts or feedback and to be an ambassador for change in the organization. Leverage those relationships that they have with other people. The other thing in preparing yourself is to set standards for tracking and recording team metrics. Set these out pretty early so that you can perhaps even test them out for yourself to see if there are any gaps before you distribute it to the team. My seventh piece of advice for preparing yourself is don't ignore your gut. If you've got a gut feeling about something, that's not saying this is what drives your decision making, but if you've got something that's kind of got you a little twisted, explore why and what information you may not have to make an effective decision so that you can move along more effectively. Um, Tips for preparing your team. Set the mental stage for change. So long before you ever roll out and say, hey, you know, you're going to get a login tomorrow, maybe those 3 or 4 months prior, you start talking about things like change management and adaptability. These can be small safety moments or things that start your meetings to help people understand like change is coming. It's a part of life. It's normal. It's natural to be anxious. A lot of times I think we forget about the human element that generally, as much as we'll say we're adaptable, we love change, we're comfortable with it, it can be very difficult to tolerate. And so helping people develop a change and growth mindset before the change comes helps. And then you can start to give people, you know, guidelines about appropriate use and, you know, and setting clear metrics for the team and giving them really good training information and material that is easily consumable. I think it's really difficult when you say, hey, here's 3 hours of training, good luck. So just be mindful of how you roll things out, give feedback regularly, even the things you don't want to hear, listen, and understand why. It'll help you be much more successful down the long road, even if your project isn't successful. What it does is it helps you build trust with your team. And I think that is more valuable than anything else you can really foster in this experience. Number 6, you know, revisit and update those approaches based on that feedback that you're getting. What can change? What can't change? Offer feedback if you're not changing something. Tell people, you know, why. Peel back a layer or so here and there, and give them the appropriate level of insight. The other thing that I think is important in making sure you're prepared is to celebrate the wins and own your failures. As a team and as a group, I think that it's, you know, important to say, okay, like, well, this is how we missed the mark. This is how we can do better. And when we win, let's celebrate like nobody is watching. It's my fourth and final step here. Thank you guys for being a part of this today, is to be powerful. And so I'll keep this brief, but I wanted to leave you with this thought from Alice Walker. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And so for me, I grappled back and forth for a while about whether or not I wanted to be a part of this conversation, feeling like, well, do I have any business here? Well, absolutely. We all have business here. I think it was Dr. Joy Bulamwini's presentation at a recent, I think, LinkedIn Live event that really stood out to me. She said, look, if you have a face, you have a voice in this conversation. And her reference is really about ethics and concerns surrounding some of the AI tools for facial recognition. But I think that applies broadly because we have got cultural sort of situation and context where people are feeling excluded. But if we exclude ourselves, we're doing ourselves no favors. And so I want to remind you to use your power, use your voice, get in rooms. And being present is sometimes half the battle. Be there to listen, to understand, ask meaningful questions like, this is an opportunity for so many of us to grow. And get in buy-in. These are the things you need to know. You need to be able to be mindful, be curious, be powerful, and make the most. Thank you, guys. I'll open the floor. I think we've got just a moment for questions, and then we've got a Q&A session immediately following.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions, but the next session is somewhat of a follow-up to this one with Uniqueka and Amanda Haven, founder of Illuminate Marketing Collective, where they will be diving deeper into the challenges and opportunities that come with integrating AI into your professional journey. But I want to thank everybody for being here today on this session, and thank you, Uniqueka, for joining us. Make sure to fill out the survey on your screen, leave us any feedback, and go ahead and jump over to the next session because you don't want to miss that. Thank you, everybody.